All right, everyone. Tuesday night of 2020 RNC, kind of a family affair. Melania Trump, Eric Trump, Tiffany Trump. Last night was just Don Jr. I don't know if we consider Charlie Kirk a part of the Trump family at this point.
He and Don are really close. I got the opportunity to go fishing with them once, and they are good friends.
Okay. How's Don as a fisherman? Pretty good.
Phenomenal. I mean, he is a huge hunter. I actually, somewhat avoided their boat. Not that I was invited. Because he's such a serious fisherman. He'd go out first boat and come in last boat. And I kind of was ready for a beer after 6 hours in the water. It was great.
I'm going to assume it was more like 6 minutes in the water, but we will continue with our RNC coverage and not Bedford's weird personal stories. RNC tonight is an interesting pair, apart from the Trump family, Mike Pompeo and then Rand Paul, which is an odd couple, but I think also representative of the ways in which Donald Trump has brought together these kind of very different sides of the conservative movement into one coalition. And that's not to say it's always going to be smooth sailing from here on out. But don't you think juxtaposing the neoconservatism of Mike Pompeo with the anti-interventionism of Rand Paul in one night is, I don't know what Rand Paul is going to talk about, but it's interesting.
Do you want me to juxtapose or juxtapay?
Yeah, so I don't know the distinction because I was educated in a public school.
Me too, and I was kicked out. The Rand Paul, the Rand Paul Pompeo thing is going to be a little interesting. I imagine they stay away from each other. This is not a cable news segment, even though we played in the cable stations, where they were going to be going at each other's throat. If they stick with last night's kind of positive message, which I suspect they will, then they will be talking more about the things that unite them as opposed to the things that separate them. However,
China.
There's something interesting going on right now because Trump has pulled the leash off of the cabinet secretaries, including Pompeo and including Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, and saying it's time to crack down on China. There's a political appetite right now in a lot of the country,
well,
except
and a
the Democratic Party.
We're in the middle of
it's
a
pandemic.
necessity.
There's a Cold War that we've been entering.
Communist China.
So you hear from Esper, you hear from the Department of Defense, and this is backed by Pompeo, that the United States needs to be kind of saber-rattling toward Asia. Now, another kind of aspect of Donald Trump's platform, a major one that they're stressing, that Rand Paul is going to care about a lot, and a lot of voters do, is that he's the first president since Ronald Reagan, as I spoke about last night, who hasn't entered the United States into a new war. He hasn't extricated us successfully from all the wars that people like Pompeo enjoy, but he hasn't actually launched any new ones, amazingly. I mean, what's a president if they don't start a war and win a Nobel Peace Prize?
Yeah. Well, the DNC was extremely light on foreign policy conversation, which I think probably is
it's probably smart. I mean,
yeah.
Joe Biden used to brag about how Barack Obama was so smart. He said we should kill bin Laden, and Joe Biden counseled him not to. I mean,
that's who I want.
I mean, imagine if it's like Obama must have been watching that and I wasn't going to tell anybody about that, man. That's embarrassing.
Hey, man, you didn't have to say that.
I'm looking forward tonight to seeing a repeat of last night and a lot of the everyday people the voices that you'll never hear on PBS or CNN or MSNBC. You'll hear them on Fox News, Fox Business, but you'll hear them on C-SPAN. We have a former abortion worker, a Planned Parenthood worker, Abby Johnson, who's going to be coming on to talk about what she witnessed in that clinic and how it changed her mind to the incredible callousness and increasing callousness of the left
towards
life. She worked
at a Planned Parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then we'll have Sandman, the young man who was targeted in Washington, D.C. by a pagan drummer, an Indian activist, who later on attacked the Catholic Basilica and was cheered on by everybody from National Review to New York Times, attacking his Catholic kids from Covington. He successfully sued CNN, wouldn't you like to say that? He'll be speaking tonight. We have people who've lost their daughters to violence from illegal immigrants. We have people who've had to deal with the drug problems, just like last night. People who've been through real-life trauma, tragedy, the kind of things that we all understand. That most of our families have not been fortunate enough to escape this, and we'll see if they're able to, like last night, draw this back to actual policy differences that the Donald Trump administration has brought to them, and paint kind of a character that we saw last night and we'll see tonight of Donald Trump as not simply the guy who will knock you over if you're in his way, but Donald Trump, the guy who can be very caring one-on-one, with people who are not in the limelight.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because the DNC did that with Biden, right? Like they brought on the Amtrak employee who had a lot of so there's an element of this on both sides where and it's obviously not unprecedented in politics.
Now, I heard a story about the Amtrak thing, and then sorry I cut you off for a second. My mansplaining. I heard a story about the Amtrak thing. A friend was behind Senator Biden when he was going in line for the vice presidential candidacy at Amtrak, and he was walking onto the train in front of them. And there's pretty lax security at Amtrak. It's amazing that it's been safe for as long as it has, thank goodness. As he was walking on, the ticket person asked, can I see your ticket, please? And he said, I'm a U.S. Senator, and continued walking. I mean,
wouldn't we all do that?
If I get a few more white hairs, I'm going to try that.
You would do that.
No, I'm kidding. I don't enter with a normal line.
Well, but again, like obviously this is spin to begin with, but there's a character element coming into both conventions. They are trying to do it with Donald Trump. What is interesting when people share these personal anecdotes about Donald Trump, again, I go back to the story that I wrote last night as the convention was unfolding because it was, I think, sheer brilliance. I think it was a rare level of insight, unseen in so many corners of the internet, and I think that's just how good I am, frankly.
I read every one of your pieces yesterday. It's very rare of me.
Thank you. No, but I wrote a piece that I mean, it actually has gotten some flack, but it was a piece about how the Republican National Convention is going to thrive in the same way that, for the same reason Joe Rogan thrives, which is media corruption, and that's like, hey, we hear all of these personal anecdotes about how great and wonderful Joe Biden is in the corporate media. What you don't hear is the stories about Donald Trump, and whether or not any of those stories
Joe Biden's a good guy.
Yeah, right. And whether or not those stories are true or representative, the point is people want to hear both sides of them. Like that's why when, for instance, like hearing from Nicholas Sandmann, that's like an episode of Joe Rogan is like giving Nicholas Sandmann a platform to tell his story. And now Rogan is like definitely off the cuff and casual in a way that a convention is not. He's not partisan in a way that a convention absolutely is. But the point remains that these are people whose voices are cut out of the corporate media, and sometimes they have really interesting things to say, and people want to hear both sides, and they want to hear the other side. And I think that's a built-in advantage for the RNC, is that like these people, we don't hear from them. We don't hear from Abby Johnson, who might get a chance to go on CNN when pro-life legislation is being debated in Alabama or Georgia or whatever, but she's going to be filtered through an incredibly hostile lens.
She could definitely go on Fox. I'd be surprised if she's ever been allowed on CNN.
But if she were, it would be hostile and it would be adversarial. And so to finally let people just like say their point, I think is more compelling than corporate media realizes. I think they still don't understand that.
And Sandman's story is going to be interesting to me. We were doing our cross-country Federalist coverage of American business reopening, we had the opportunity to drive up from the south and come up toward Louisville through the south. So we were able to stop coming up from Louisville, so we were able to stop in Cincinnati and the southern border of Kentucky and Ohio. And that's just the northern border of Kentucky where Sandman's from. We swung by the school, which was closed because, China. It was one of the prettiest churches I've ever seen, and the neighborhood was pretty, and the city's going through a rebirth, but it was not a wealthy neighborhood. Right. This was not a wealthy parish. It was not, the houses were primed. They could fit in Capitol Hill in D.C., but the real estate market wasn't quite there yet. And when he was attacked as a white child of privilege Catholic private school, what they didn't quite realize is he's from northern Kentucky on the Ohio border in a small Catholic school in a neighborhood that is largely industrial and working class. It's not at all the idea that he's a white kid who's thin, who's like 16 years old, therefore he must be from some elite lacrosse team. He paints a different picture. Now, what would be surprising is he came out tonight and gave word for word Kimberly Guilfoyle's speech. Wouldn't that be amazing? Like, because she just did it best. He's like, you know what? I'm going to give her exact speech. No one could say it better.
Well, the Kimberly Guilfoyle memes have been fantastic, but I think there's something important in the fact that Sandman is even speaking. This was one of the things that piqued my interest about the RNC to begin with. I typically hate these kinds of partisan, opportunities to just spin their platform. Not usually entertaining, but Nicholas Sandman, this is fascinating. He's just a kid. You know how many times...
He's just a boy!
You know how many times protesters and high school students in town D.C. clash on a national mall? I guarantee you that happens in some capacity every single day, because high school kids and protesters, like, it's just there's a curiosity there. And the fact that this poor kid happened to get caught on camera in a more heated exchange, and this was
he was just looking at him.
Yeah, right. And this was
smirking with his privilege, his northern coal country privilege.
And now he took all that coal country privilege to the bank. But he is a good example of somebody who, like, the Republican Party under Donald Trump has. You can add anti-corporate media plank to its platform, and that's so important. The media still doesn't actually really understand. Actually, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on Tuesday came out with a surprisingly cogent bit of media criticism explaining how narratives get framed, and like facts can be correct, but narratives can be wrong and misleading. I don't think Bernie Sanders ran against the media.
Imagine if her criticism was self-aware.
Right.
I mean, if she was actually the truth behind the truth woke, how amazing would that be?
She might get there someday. The woman who's been on Vogue magazine or whatever glossy magazine she's been on and gets fawning coverage from every corporate media outlet.
No one asked me about my skin routine.
I don't really want to know your skin routine. But this is
Sunburn.
I think it's really important, and I think what we're hearing from the Republican National Convention, this is a party under Trump that is tapping into, we've known this for years, like this is how an Obama voter becomes an Obama-Trump voter. It's because there is this like populist discontent with elites, but also very specifically with the media. Bernie Sanders ran against the media. And the left and the neoliberal left doesn't really understand that.
And it shocked me at first because I was, I guess I got from Massachusetts to the Beltway. I had been trained in the Koch Institute in economics and went to American University. And, I guess I was insulated from this stuff. I was shocked the first time I heard that voters were in between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. Now, fortunately, having really dug into this and learned a lot more about it, it's so obvious. It's complete discontent from a ruling class on both sides has absolutely left you behind. And I caught on quickly. The education was very fast in 2015. And I remember being very surprised on the way to dinner one night when someone said they were in between Bernie Sanders and Marco Rubio. I thought, why would you vote for Marco Rubio? Well, I actually liked.
Oh, I was a big Rubio person.
But I just thought, like, the two of those things, what?
Well, Rubio is such an interesting case study in the evolution of the Republican Party under Trump and the sort of, like, awakening that has happened in terms of, like, neoliberal economic policies and how the right is starting to evolve into kind of in some quarters, a very smart policy-centered rebuke of that, talking about things like an industrial policy. But we're not going to hear a lot about that probably. What we are going to hear about over the course of this convention is the culture war. This is a culture war convention, and it's compelling because these aren't stories that get told. The other thing that we absolutely need to mention, and Ben Domenech, our publisher, talked about this in Fox and Friends this morning, is the split screen. The split screen is so important because the split screen
CNN won't get that.
CNN, you won't get it if you're watching CNN, but there's such Republicans will be very wise to talk about what's happening in Kenosha right now because it's happening against the backdrop of a Democratic Party that tried to normalize #defund the police.
Do you think Melania recorded her speech 3 weeks ago, like Michelle Obama did?
No,
Queen
I don't.
Michelle. I mean, they will actually be able to respond to what's going on in Wisconsin. To your point, because the Republicans are running a live event, they don't have to take John Kasich out to a field and wait for the sun to be right on the golden leaves of grain to fields of grain to have the drone footage just catch him perfectly to convince the American people to vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, that's what John Kasich does. He's
does.
a great surrogate for Donald Trump.
I'm probably most excited tonight to hear from a Maine lobsterman.
Yeah, that's on the docket. It's on the docket.
Jason Joyce.
But that split screen, I think,
He's a frickin' lobsterman.
You just wanted to do your accent.
And Donald Trump did a lot for the lobsterman. today. He broke down some trade barriers, and lots of men are suffering.
Well, we're talking about our
You
native
can get that
accents.
stuff cheap.
I can start doing my accent. If we're talking about Kenosha, I can start doing my
Boston.
my
Thanks to
native
Matt
accent.
Damon, the Boston accent is beloved.
The Boston accent is
You don't just have Fargo.
Paul Ryan didn't do for the Wisconsin accent what
No.
Matt Damon was
Slightly
able to do
broader
for the
chest than Paul
Boston.
Ryan.
So anyway, this is a culture war convention. The split screen is so important. Democrats didn't mention the violence in the streets really once that I can think of. They spoke in vagaries about Joe Biden's character and tried to convince Americans that Democrats were the real patriots, which is something that they could only get away with because of the fact that there was no live audience to kneel over the national anthem or boo God, whatever it is. But anyway, the point is, culture war convention. We have the backdrop of the really tragic stuff happening in Kenosha, which is that the businesses that in some cases immigrants and in other cases small business owners that have spent their life, their blood, sweat, and their tears building are being looted, and this is already a difficult economic time for so many small businesses. And they're being looted, they're being burned, they're being targeted. This is a bellwether area for Wisconsin. It's a district that went for Obama and then went for Trump. This is going to be a huge, it's showing absolutely no signs of stopping, and it's not a major urban center. It's essentially a suburb of Milwaukee, and so this is something that Republicans should talk about. It's much easier for Republicans to talk about than Democrats, but
Democrats aren't talking about it at all.
No, because they don't want to.
No.
What are they going to say, defund the police?
That'll work.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, do you know who is going to be talking about the Patriots tonight? Jason Joyce. Definitely a Pats fan.
Yeah, he's definitely a Pats fan.
Well, cheers, guys. Tune in tonight for our coverage. Tune in the morning for our special coverage all across the front page. We'll be working all night after you get to go to bed, and in the morning we'll get up to check in with you again.
Yeah, like and subscribe. But if you subscribe, you'll be notified when new videos come up, and we're doing a lot of videos now, especially during the convention. So you don't want to miss any of that. I'm Emily Jashinsky. He's Chris Bedford. Tune in tomorrow for more.